predictive value. In science, we use predictive value. And I use that in medicine all the time. If I observe something, can I predict something, you know? And so all the V patterns and floor patterns and spalling and low burns and high intensity fires and grazed glass and needle springs in a mattress and all of these have no predictive value. They can occur due to so many different causes. And they need not be arson necessarily. They can occur in arson, but they need not necessarily be arson. So we recognize that. But the question that we have to address is, was this known to field investigators, not scientists, but field investigators in late 1991 and January of 1992 when they did the investigation. And when they testified at the trial in August 1992, did they know that? That's the question that we have to address.
Or should they have known that?
Should they have known that? And I don't think that they had the knowledge, to be honest.
Right. And I completely agree with all of that analysis. Any further discussion?
Just comment up here on the statement. The panel unanimously believes that the arson experts did not commit professional negligence or conduct. The unanimous belief is that how strong a statement is that? Is this
That just
you
means
were convinced?
that all
You're convinced, or how far?
I thought that, well, I can't speak for the others, but for myself, it meant that having read the record, having analyzed all the documentary information that we have, and the expert investigation that we have, I thought that the better weight of evidence supported that conclusion.
Supported that conclusion.
You know, I guess we ought to go back to the language that we adopted in policies and procedures, and the variations that we have there. And we have a phraseology in there that's probably something closer to what I just said. That language wasn't picked for any particular value.
Okay.
And the document that you have that says Willingham panel recommendations is not an up-to-date document. That is a draft document from the last panel discussion, where there was opposition to the jurisdictional issues that John's clarified won't be part of the final report.
Right.
And we'd also discussed the need in a final report to go into a lot more detail about why we felt there wasn't professional negligence.
This is not a substitute for the report.
So, I mean, this is really just very much a summary.
I'm just asking for a belief is good, but I think being convinced is stronger.
Well,
and to feel that is good. And to believe it is nice, but to be convinced is another.
The word, I didn't have any particular meaning by the word.
To follow up on what you were saying, I didn't participate in the first panel discussion. I did in the second one, and I clearly remember what you just alluded to, that there was not an agreement between the panel members in terms of the jurisdictional issue.
Right.
A couple of panel members expressed what you have just articulated about the state of the science at that time and your opinion about the other report. Just for clarification, at that time, I withheld any comment on that to go back and look at it again, just so we're all clear on that. That was obviously, some of us were present, some of us were on the telephone calls, we were going back and forth, so I can see how that would be missed, but that was what happened. So, Dr. Kerrigan, what do you think about the parts of Dr. Byler's report where he talks, for instance, about in investigating these arsons, even at that time, what would be expected of an arson investigator would be elimination. In other words, going through and systematically eliminating other causes of the fire. And he comments, certainly at least on the Willis investigation, I think also on the Willingham investigation, that he does not believe that that was done. That's not getting into things that would be covered in the evolution of science. That's just the basis. What are your thoughts on that?
You know, to tell you the truth, I didn't really focus on that very much. I focused more on the science and the standard of practices NFPA existed at that time.
So you're differentiating between, I guess, just observations and investigative techniques that might apply to arson or to apply to other types of crime scenes versus specific scientific examinations of potential arson scenes. Is that what you're saying?
Right, yeah.
Okay.
And I had a reaction to that, Lance. You know, part of the problem of choosing a case where we don't have the ability to ask the expert to respond to a question like that is that it is unfair for us to draw firm conclusions. You know, I don't try cases in which your client's dead. You know, it would cut down on the amount of information that I would have to get, but it would be unfair to your client. Courts permanently abate cases where that happens because there's no point in going forward. Here we're making an accusation. We're gonna label an investigator who did something 20, 25 years ago without any opportunity for him to defend himself. Nonetheless, there is his testimony, and throughout his testimony, he very clearly, at least to the limited amounts that he was asked questions, indicates that he did eliminate other causes, you know, checking for light switches or whatever. Now, there wasn't a lot of questions developed by either the prosecution or defense for whatever strategic reasons existed at the time. They didn't go into the minutiae and the detail that we might want to go into today, but it would be hardly fair to jump to the conclusion, which Dr. Byler did, that this investigator didn't do those things because he couldn't find information showing it either in his testimony or in his investigative reports. Now, you can criticize his reports if they weren't as detailed as we would want them today. And you can criticize the defense attorney if he didn't ask the kinds of questions we might ask today. But that's a different thing from trying to jump to the conclusion that that expert was negligent or acted with misconduct because we didn't all make a great record 25 years ago. So I would be very cautious, and I would criticize Byler severely for jumping to those kinds of conclusions without having an understanding of the context of a trial and how these things develop.
I just wanted to add a couple of more things. Obviously, 921 comes up with what is called the scientific method. And the scientific method requires you to have a hypothesis and then you try to disprove that. And then only after you've done that, you come to a conclusion. And of course, the objective in a fire investigation is to decide where did the fire start, and why did the fire start, or the origin of the fire and the cause of the fire. This is what it's all about. But that's true for a lot of different sciences also, not just fire investigation. When I have a dead body, I look at the case and say, what is the cause of death and what caused this death? And obviously, I have to have a hypothesis, and I must prove or disprove that. But do I have to go through each of the steps, or does my experience teach me to reach that conclusion in a very short time? I have a gunshot wound to the head, it's a contact gunshot wound. Do I have to go to the hypothesis, you know, and prove and disprove that? And so we have to take all that into consideration before jumping up and say, well, this fire marshal didn't have a hypothesis, and therefore everything he did was flawed, you know. And I just had a comment on that, and you know, I think it's important to do that, and I think it's a part of your training. This is how you are taught and trained to investigate things scientifically, if I may use the word. But at the end of the day, you know, a lot of that done is routinely in your mind, intellectually, and you know, you come to a rapid conclusion in some cases, and some cases are very hard, and you have to do a lot of more work.
Okay. Well, any further discussion? Any questions?
Mr. Bradley, I do have a point of information that they assist.
You may not interrupt the commission while we're talking. There's a public comment part. And I'm declining. I'm declining to give an opportunity to interrupt this commission's work at this point. You'll have a public comment period. We're not going to
vote.
Excuse me?
Before you vote?
No.
Well, you know, I must protest that.
Well, then I'm going to ask you to please either sit down and be quiet or leave, because you're not on the commission and you're not given an opportunity to do this.
But we're the complainant, and we submitted a letter on August 13th, 2008. And what we asked you to decide was not the negligence of the individual examiner, but if you look at it, this complaint was brought against the Texas Fire Marshal's office. And what we were asking, and if you look at page 2 of the letter, is should they have been aware of NFPA 921 in 1992? It's the Fire Marshal's office, not the individual. Should they have substantially revised its arson analysis procedures thereafter?